There's a certain kind of content creator who's been around as long as the internet itself. The skeptic, the debunker, the one who walks into the haunted house, stands in front of the shrine, looks straight into the camera, and says, "Prove it. Scare me. I dare you." Most of the time, nothing happens. That's usually the whole point. The video ends with a shrug, a laugh, guess ghosts aren't real after all. But every so often, something happens afterward that makes people stop laughing. And this month in China, one of those creators, a young woman with over 1 million followers built entirely on dismissing the supernatural, died in a car accident weeks after mocking a shrine on camera. Her family has now publicly asked people to stop talking about it that way. We're going to talk about it anyway, carefully, because this isn't really a story about one accident. It's a story about something that happens across every culture, every generation, and honestly, every one of us. The moment we hear, "She tempted fate," and some small, ancient part of our brain leans in and says, "Yeah, that checks out." Let's lay out exactly what's known, because the facts alone are enough without embellishment. Her name was Jiang Xiaoru online. Real name, Li Zhuting, 24 years old, from Lanshan County in Hunan Province, China. She built her following, over 1 million subscribers, on short-form videos built around a single premise: debunking superstition. She'd walk into abandoned buildings people claimed were haunted. She'd film herself knocking over religious statues. In one video that circulated widely, she's seen striking a statue of Guanyin, a bodhisattva deeply revered across Chinese Buddhism, and daring the camera, more or less, "Let's see how long I survive after this." In other videos, she called phone numbers belonging to people who died in car accidents, just to see what would happen. On July 15th, in the early hours of the morning, she was traveling from Liuzhou back to Guangzhou in a carpooled ride when the vehicle was involved in a severe crash on a stretch of road in Zhaoqing. Her injuries were extensive: massive trauma, hemorrhagic shock, severe brain injury. She was placed in intensive care at Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hospital and remained there for nearly a month. On August 10th, local village officials confirmed she had died from her injuries. Almost immediately, the clip of her mocking the Guanyin statue resurfaced across Chinese social media, paired with her own words back to her, "Let's see how long I survive." However, the words became prophecy. People weren't just sad. A huge number of them were treating this as confirmation. Proof. The thing finally caught up with her. And then, on August 11th, her family posted a statement through her own account. They asked, plainly, for people to stop framing her death as karma, as prophecy, as anything other than a tragic accident. They asked to be allowed to grieve without an entire internet turning their daughter into a morality lesson. That request matters. And it's exactly why we're not going to spend this episode asking, was it real? We don't know. And honestly, nobody watching this video is going to find out today either. What we can actually look at carefully and with some distance is why so many people instantly reached for the same explanation. Because this isn't the first time it's happened, and it almost certainly won't be the last. One detail about her videos is worth sitting with, because it changes how you might read this whole story. One of the locations she filmed at was Liwan Plaza in Guangzhou, arguably the most famous haunted location in modern Chinese urban legend. For decades, most of its retail units have sat empty despite prime real estate in one of China's biggest cities. The popular explanation, repeated for years in Chinese media and word of mouth, is bad feng shui. That something about the building's design or placement created a kind of curse that's kept it half empty since it opened. Here's where it's worth pausing on something specific to Chinese folk belief, because it complicates the simple, "she mocked a god and paid for it," reading a lot of people jump to. In Chinese folk religion, there's a specific and fairly widely held idea about what happens to a statue, a Guanyin, a local deity, any consecrated image, once it's abandoned. As long as that statue sits in a home or a proper temple, receiving offerings, incense, prayer, it's understood to actually house the deity it represents. But once it's discarded, left in a ruin, propped against a tree, dumped somewhere with nobody tending it anymore, the belief is that the deity itself doesn't stay. It leaves. What moves into that empty vessel afterward isn't the god at all. It's something else, a wandering spirit, a fox spirit, a mountain demon, some minor entity looking for a place to squat, drawn to the shape and residual power of an abandoned sacred object the way something might be drawn to any building left empty and unlocked. And there's a second, related idea sitting underneath that one. A real deity, a proper god, doesn't kill someone over something this small. That's simply not how legitimate gods are understood to behave in this belief system. A god that lashes out and takes a life over an insult to a discarded statue isn't acting like a god at all. Which means, if you actually take this belief system seriously on its own terms, rather than treating it as one flat "don't anger the ghosts" idea, what she filmed herself smashing in that video almost certainly wasn't a god by the time she got to it. Long abandoned, sitting somewhere nobody had prayed to in years, whatever she actually provoked was already something else entirely. That's not a comforting reframe. If anything, it's a darker one. It means the popular karma narrative, the neat, satisfying story where a proper, righteous deity punished her for disrespect, probably isn't even the correct version of the belief system people think they're invoking. The real folklore is messier and stranger than that. Not a god's justice. Something opportunistic, living in a shell a god had already left behind. We're not saying that's what happened. We're saying, if you're going to take this seriously at all, take it seriously on its actual terms, not the flattened, simplified version that trends well online. If you've spent any time in this corner of the internet, you'll notice a pattern. Someone builds an audience by defying something a culture treats as sacred or dangerous. Then something bad happens to them, and the story writes itself before anyone's even finished processing what actually occurred. The most famous case, at least for an English-speaking audience, doesn't even involve a death. But it's worth understanding, because it shows exactly how this works in the West too. Back in 2017, YouTuber Logan Paul, at the time one of the biggest creators on the platform, over 15 million subscribers, traveled to Aokigahara, a forest at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan, sometimes referred to in the West as the Suicide Forest. A place treated with genuine cultural weight and grief in Japan, tied to real, ongoing loss of life. While filming there, he and his group came across an actual body, someone who had recently died by suicide. Rather than stopping the camera and leaving with the dignity the moment demanded, Paul kept filming, kept talking, and uploaded the footage. The backlash was immediate and enormous. YouTube pulled him from its top ad-tier program, paused a project he had in development with the platform, and Paul issued a public apology amid a genuine, sustained collapse in how he was perceived. Nobody needed to invoke a curse for that one. The consequence was entirely human, entirely earned, played out in real time in front of millions of people. But notice the shape of the story. Defy something sacred, face consequences. The internet remembers. There's another case, less famous but still widely documented, that leans more directly into the supernatural framing, the story of the so-called debug box. In 2003, an antiques dealer named Kevin Manis listed a wine cabinet on eBay along with a long, detailed backstory, that it had belonged to a Holocaust survivor, that it was believed in Jewish folklore to house a debug, a restless, malevolent spirit, and that everyone who'd owned it since had experienced nightmares, unexplained illness, and misfortune. The listing went viral before viral was even really a word people used that way. A later owner, a man named Jason Haxton, actually wrote an entire book chronicling health problems he attributed to owning the box. Hollywood eventually optioned the story, and it became the basis for the 2012 film, The Possession. Now, it's worth being honest about what this case actually is. It's a real listing, a real chain of owners, a real book, a real film. What isn't independently documented anywhere is the actual claim at the center of it, that the box caused any of what happened to the people who owned it. Every account comes from the owners themselves. No hospital records, no independent investigation, nothing outside of what people chose to say about their own lives after they'd already decided the box was cursed. Which doesn't mean nothing happened to them. Bad years happen to everyone. It means we only have their own retroactive explanation for why. And that pattern, something bad happens, then gets reinterpreted through a lens the person already believed in, shows up constantly. Even the Warren family, the paranormal investigators whose stories inspired the Annabelle films, have told a version of this exact story themselves. A young man who allegedly mocked the real Annabelle doll in their museum, taunted it to hurt him, and died in a motorcycle accident days later. That story has never been verified by anyone outside the Warrens' own retelling. No independent news coverage from the time it supposedly happened. No named source beyond the people who ran the museum the doll was displayed in. Which brings us to the actual question worth asking. Why does the human brain do this? Why, the instant something bad happens to someone who mocked a shrine, a doll, a forest, a cursed box, does an entire audience arrive at the same explanation within hours without needing to be told to? Before we get into why brains do this, it's worth pointing out, plenty of people in China said exactly this themselves in the days right after her death. Commentators pointed out something simple and true. China records a staggering number of traffic deaths every single year. A car accident is an extremely well-documented, extremely common risk. There is no evidence connecting what she filmed to what happened to her on that road. None. Multiple people made that exact point publicly, calmly, without needing to invoke anything supernatural at all. And yet her words became prophecy. Narratives still spread faster and further than the rational explanation did. That gap between what the evidence actually supports and what the story people actually told each other is the real subject of this half of the episode. There's a term for part of it: apophenia, the tendency of the human brain to perceive meaningful patterns and connections in random or unrelated data. Your brain isn't built to process coincidences comfortably. It's built to find causes. Because for most of human history, spotting a real pattern quickly was the difference between surviving a threat and not noticing it in time. That same wiring, pointed at a random car accident weeks after a video about defying a shrine, doesn't know the difference between a genuine pattern and two unrelated events sitting close together in time. It just says, connection found. There's also something older and more narrative running underneath it. What a lot of literary scholars call the hubris narrative, going all the way back to Greek tragedy. A character defies the gods, or fate, or some natural order, and is punished for the defiance specifically because of the defiance. It's one of the oldest story shapes humans tell each other, across almost every culture on Earth, and it persists because it's satisfying in a way that random bad thing happened to random person simply isn't. A universe where arrogance gets punished is, in a strange way, a more comforting universe than one where terrible things just happen to people for no reason at all. And there's a cross-cultural pattern worth noticing too. Nearly every culture, independently, developed some version of the same instinct. Don't mock the dead, don't disturb what you don't understand, leave the shrine alone, don't go looking for what's better left undisturbed. Javanese communities have it. Chinese folk religion has it. Jewish folklore has it. Catholic communities across Latin America have it. Wrapped around everything from La Llorona to unmarked graves. That's either a coincidence repeated across thousands of unrelated cultures over thousands of years, or it's pointing at something underneath the belief itself that's actually useful. A reminder to treat grief, death, and the unknown with some basic caution and respect, dressed up in supernatural language, because supernatural language is what got remembered and passed down, generation after generation, when plain advice usually just got forgotten. So, was it a curse? We genuinely don't know, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. What we do know is that a young woman is dead, a family is grieving, and an entire internet decided, within hours, exactly what that death meant, without asking the people who actually loved her whether they wanted it decided at all. Maybe there's nothing supernatural about any of this. Maybe it really is just coincidence. Bad road conditions, an unlucky hour of the night, statistics catching up the way they eventually catch up with all of us. But maybe that's exactly why so many cultures, across thousands of years, independently arrived at the same instinct. Leave the shrine alone. Don't mock what you don't fully understand. Don't tempt what might, somehow, actually be listening. You don't have to believe in ghosts to understand why so many people, across so much of human history, have chosen not to test them. We'll leave you with that. If stories like this make you think twice next time you walk past a shrine or a grave or somewhere a culture has quietly agreed to leave alone, that's exactly what we dig into every week at Whispers Beyond Archives. Tuesday, you get the legend brought to life. Friday, we go looking for how much of it might actually be real. Subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss either one, and let us know in the comments. Do you believe in tempting fate? Or is it always just coincidence? We'll see you Tuesday.